Does the flaps of a butterfly's wings in Brazil set off a tornado in Texas? Or does a seemingly insignificant act of bumping into someone cause a long chain of causes and effects that leads to a war or a new medical discovery? So, as the title suggests, I'm talking about the butterfly effect. And this is probably something you already know, but there is a different approach I want to take on it. So, let's rewind for a moment. Sometime around 2011, I was binging a lot of political philosophy, reading everything from like Noam Chomsky to Thomas Sowell, and I was beginning a new book. Not far into this book, I had this epiphany that brought the whole book's philosophy into question. The book at the time was Anarchy, State, and Utopia by Robert Nozick, and I still have it till this day. And if you've ever meddled into an anarchist or libertarian circles, you kind of already know the emphasis put upon individual responsibility. You know the phrases and maxims they use about individualism, but here's the kicker. Since the butterfly effect is true, how are we supposed to hold anybody individually responsible? How can you be held accountable for the infinite amount of events you set into motion and their consequences? Not to mention, how do you know who is truly responsible for something that has happened to you, since a whole cascade of causes and effects needed to take place? Isn't everyone at least partially responsible, since everything is so intertwined? This is what I coined as the Libertarian's Dilemma. So if you're a little confused, let me give you a quick refresher. The butterfly effect is pretty simple, actually. It works on the premise that any event can have or create an infinite number of effects. So like a tornado would need the perfect mixture of hot air, cold air, and pressure and so forth. But if those conditions are only 99% of the way there just isn't any tornado. Maybe, just maybe, a butterfly across the world flapping its wings is what it will take to cause a ripple effect in order to generate that last 0.1% that is needed to happen. So you can see this illustrated in movies like Ice Age. Or Avengers Endgame, where they go back in time and make a tiny change that can have catastrophic impacts to the future.
Ellie, I'm gonna grab a quick slice. Go! Stairs!
Rick and Morty does this spectacularly as well.
I'm crazy! I don't know what to do! Oh god, now there's 3 of them! We're outnumbered! Get in the cupboards! Wait, don't do that. They'll know. Wait, think about getting in the cupboards, but don't really. Ah!
The tiny change to initial conditions can have drastic consequences. Everything is intertwined and interdependent. So any action you do is the result of a bunch of previous actions set into motion by any other person, place, or thing. This ties into my previous video on free will. If you're interested in it, you can check it out. So then the question becomes, how does someone make sense of individual responsibility? If no individual is ever wholly responsible, given the butterfly effect is true, then doesn't that mean everyone in some kind of way, shape, or form is responsible for everything, since everything is so deeply intertwined? Which some take it as a nobody is innocent kind of attitude. But the decisions you make could end up getting some child injured in a sweatshop and killed. And you could go your whole life never fully aware of how many things you set off down the line because of a tiny, seemingly insignificant choice you once made. You could have simply just been trying to buy a new pair of Nikes, not knowing that would cause a child in a sweatshop halfway across the world who's making your shoes to get injured on the job and potentially lose their life. So, another example is, let's take the disastrous collapse of Afghanistan to the Taliban. Some would say the head of the Department of Defense, Mark Milley, or Miley, was responsible? Or Joe Biden? Or is it Trump's fault since he perpetuated it? Or Obama's? Or is it Bush's fault for invading Afghanistan to begin with? Or is it us for voting these politicians in? Like, who is actually responsible for this? So then, who is the original individual responsible for the chain of events? We can pretty much always rewind it back to some other person or event because of the whole ripple effect of the butterfly effect. There doesn't seem to be an easy answer for this, since we never really know how much the consequences of our actions were caused by just you and you alone, let alone some external forces. We don't have any way to calculate how responsible someone would be, but we know that surely they have to have played some part, and we can't just let them off the hook. It's essentially an incalculable problem, and one that brings into question just how much free will we really have, since everything you say or do was influenced by infinite number of things that happened before it. At the end of the day, despite the fact that we can't calculate for certain how much you're individually responsible for anything, some argue that it's still useful to hold people accountable, otherwise the fabric of society breaks apart. And I can definitely understand why they think that. And others argue that it takes a team effort and that we all play a role in everything that happens in the world. So in a sense, nobody is innocent and we all get what's coming to us. Or you could take the opposite approach and say, since we can't control all the events that happened before our birth, that caused us to be born where we are, into the family we have, and the school we went to, and the friends we've made, that since we have little or literally no control over it, that it means we can't be held responsible. If a chain of events happened long before your birth that would cause your car to drive over a pothole, pop your tire and swerve and hit someone, couldn't you argue that you didn't have any choice in the matter, since everything was set into motion to cause you to unintentionally hit someone? Just to be clear, this in no kind way, shape, or form lets people off the hook when it comes to responsibility. This means that everybody is more or less responsible for the good, keep in mind the good, and the bad that happens. It really makes it difficult to gauge how much something is your fault. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment. Also, feel free to check out my other videos. And on a side note, if you're interested, Veritasium did an amazing video on the butterfly effect. You should definitely check it out. I'll leave a link in the description. Okay, now for some news. So when I first created this channel, the names and logos, the banner and everything were all just a placeholder for when I could come up with an actual proper name. So in case you haven't noticed, my channel has or will have a new banner. There is a new logo in the works, and we'll have a new video background. So this is going to be my last video as True96, and starting with my next video, the channel will be rebranded to Mr.Nuance. After giving it much thought and looking at what other channel names were available on YouTube, that was one that was available and happened to fit kind of what I was going for with the channel. So I've also started 2 other channels in the meantime that I intend to keep completely separate from this channel. In case you haven't noticed, I don't show my face, and that is intentional on this channel. And that it gives it a certain level of anonymity. Making videos that I make and want to make can require that my identity not be so visible for the sake of, you know, like being canceled, which I also have a video on. I have tons of scripts I have already started for future videos, such as the topic of the philosophy of relativism, how to tackle pollution from an economic perspective, the philosophy of bodily autonomy, the birth of woke corporations and why it's happening, and the Great Resignation, as well as tons more. So I started working on a script as soon as it pops into my head. I let it sit and I work out the details and start to piece together a video. I'm a newbie when it comes to Adobe too, but slowly I'm looking to add more eye candy to my videos and better effects to help tell a better story. Also, the more and more I find myself working on scripts and ideas, the more I find that this channel is probably going to be turned into a predominantly philosophy channel with the occasional dips into like economics, business, and politics. Most things, even when it comes to those other topics, it'll probably be things like political philosophy or even economic philosophy. So just keep that in mind.